Hey everybody, greetings. I am your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and this is the latest installment of my horror movie Superlatives series that I am collaborating with my good friend Carlin. We're wrapping up the 70s this week with our picks for the entire decade. Now, we all limit to selecting the picks that we already made for each category, plus one runner-up. Now, the most amazing category was extremely tough, much harder than picking the most amazing for the 80s when we wrapped up that decade. Carl and I talk all the time how much fun we have making our picks, and then waiting for the other person to see what their picks are, reading the comments of what your guys' picks are. It's so much fun. When it's difficult to make these selections, it really does make it interesting. Before, I do hope that you consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and please do so on both of our channels as well as hitting that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Carl puts out 3 or 4 movie reviews every week. They're really great, in-depth. And I have my Nails in a Coffin series, which comes out every Friday, which is a ton of fun. And I'll have a link up here to some of those movies, and check them out because I am staying in Haddonfield for the next few weeks. As always, after you watch this video, please go to Carl's channel. Link will be in the description. Watch his video with the same title as this one. Then go to the community tab on his page and vote for who you thought had the better picks, whether they most closely resembled your own or had better justifications. Doesn't matter. Watch both videos and vote. It's all for fun. Now remember, these are our picks, and they may and probably will be totally different than what your picks are. So please let me know in the comments section down below what your picks would be. So thanks again for checking this video out. Let's get started and pick out some horror movie superlatives for the 1970s. And my selection for the most amazing horror movie to come out in the 1970s. This was extremely difficult to make. There were so many great movies to choose from that I selected for most amazing. Alien, Jaws, Carrie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I had to go with my favorite, Halloween, which was released in 1978. John Carpenter's Halloween is one of the best slashers ever made. The directing, the cinematography, the score, everything about this movie I just loved. They took a plain white mask and they made it terrifying. It's one of the most recognizable horror masks in the history of horror over 40 years later, and it's a great movie. It's a shame a lot of the movies in the franchise really aren't that great, but Michael Myers' Halloween, he has a legacy that probably will live on forever. We got a new Halloween movie coming out in just a few short weeks, so yeah, and I've had a lot of fun covering the Halloween franchise on my Nails in a Coffin series, but I love Halloween. Your most amazing selection may be different. I'm not saying it's better than the other movies, that I selected for most amazing, but it's my favorite selection out of all those movies, and that's why I selected it as my most amazing selection for the 1970s. Now, for my runner-up, again, not an easy decision choosing a runner-up, but I went with 1975's Jaws. Again, this movie is extremely close to my most amazing for the entire decade. And if you had this as your most amazing, that's an outstanding choice. This movie is as close to perfect as you can get, and it's for all the same reasons that I mentioned why I love Halloween so much. The acting, the directing, the score, Quint's monologue is so fantastic. And one thing that's so great about this movie, Steven Spielberg took, a shark, which is, a deadly creature, but he didn't show too much of it, and that made it more terrifying. Not showing too much of the villain really works with Jaws. First big summer blockbuster, it made people terrified to go into the ocean. Nearly 50 years later, it probably still terrifies people to go in the ocean because of Jaws. One of Steven Spielberg's, greatest movies, and I had to select it for my runner-up for the most amazing horror movie to come out in the 1970s. My selection for the best So Bad It's Good movie for the 1970s, I went with Prophecy, which came out in 1979. I have a lot of fun watching this movie. It's about a giant mutated bear that's attacking a logging company and a local Native American tribe. The logging company has been dumping toxic waste in the river, which results in mutated animals. And then this movie is a good example of so bad it's good because some of the acting choices are really not that great. The performances, some are either really wooden or overacted, but I have such a fun time watching this movie because the effects of this mutated bear, you can't help but laugh at it because it's just so much fun. The effects in this movie, of course, they're all practical being in the 1970s, but it's a ton of fun. The sleeping bag kill is one of the most hysterical kills I've ever seen in a horror movie. And it's like I said, I keep saying it's fun because it is. It's a fun movie to watch. So Bad It's Good movies, they're not for everybody. Some people don't get enjoyment out of bad movies. And trust me, there are movies out there that I just don't enjoy because they're bad. But when a movie's so bad, it's enjoyable. Yeah, you can't help but smile watching it just to enjoy the insanity. Whether or not, the directors and the producers intended to make a so bad it's good film, sometimes it just works out that way. And for me, Prophecy really fits that bill, and that's why I selected as my best so bad it's good movie in the 1970s. But we also have my runner-up, which again was very close to my selection, but I went with 1974's Blood for Dracula. It's an Andy Warhol movie starring Udo Kier as Dracula. He's in a town in Italy looking for the blood from virgins. However, it's not as easy as it sounds, and he's going to have some issues finding virgin blood in Italy. Udo Kier puts everything into his performance, and this movie is another great example of when an actor is hamming it up and loving every minute of it. That type of passion comes out in every performance with Udo Kier playing Dracula in this movie, and the movie's not going to be for everybody. If you're looking for a serious vampire movie, this is not it. But if you're familiar with Andy Warhol and Udo Kier's performances, there's not many other movies that's going to really fit that bill for so bad it's good that you're going to enjoy it a lot as Blood for Dracula, which came out in 1974. A totally excellent example of so bad it's good. For my most WTF movie for 1970s, this was a little bit easier. The Baby, which came out in 1973. I love introducing this movie to someone who has never seen it before. I try and make them go in blind, and I just want to see their reaction because it's similar to the reaction I had when I first saw The Baby. The Baby is filled with WTF moments. Movies about a family with one of their kids is a grown-up man with the mentality of a baby. Social worker visits the home to make an assessment, and what follows can only be described as WTF. There's a scene with a babysitter, and there's a scene with baby sister, and you almost have to watch this movie in silence as you try and process what the hell you are watching. It's a wild movie with an ending that really will stick with you. When this movie's first time I watched it and the movie was over and I saw the ending, I just kind of sat there in silence like, what the hell did I just watch? What was that ending? Totally enjoyable, and it's a great movie. I'll recommend this movie to anybody if you like WTF movies. And yeah, The Baby, my most WTF movie for the 1970s. Now, my runner-up, I went with It's Alive, released in 1974. Larry Cohen's WTF film is about a couple who has a baby, and as soon as it's born, it kills almost everybody in the hospital, and then escapes. It was born as a mutated monster, and that law enforcement is hunting it like it's Michael Myers on steroids throughout this movie. Nothing can stop this baby, not a baby killing machine, but a killing machine that is a baby. It's a Larry Cohen movie. He makes excellent WTF movies such as Q, The Winged Serpent, and The Stuff. It's Alive is no different. It's a movie that's not going to be for everybody, but if you're looking for like a WTF movie, yeah, you could do much worse than selecting It's Alive. And my selection for best gore of the 1970s goes to Zombie, released in 1979. A little bit of an easier selection for choosing the entire decade. You have a zombie fighting a shark, which has to be seen to believe because it was a real live shark. You have the eye gouge scene, which still holds up today over 40 years later. And I'll put those practical effects up against any crappy CGI that we see in horror movies nowadays. I love the look of the zombies. They kind of look burnt and baked in the sun. When the zombies start attacking humans, they get their throats ripped out and the bitten. And it just looks really, really great. It's a great movie, and I'm going to keep going back to that eye gouge scene because you really don't see a lot of scenes like that in a movie pulled off so well with practical effects that it looks entirely real as if it totally happened to somebody. And even the eye gouge scene alone, Zombie has great special effects. The look of the zombies are fantastic. They're unique. This movie is unique. It's great, and an easier selection for me to pick best gore out of the entire 1970s. For my most runner-up, it's another easy selection for best score, and that goes to The Incredible Melting Man, which released in 1977. Another great movie with practical effects. Again, the movie's about a man who returns to Earth from space. His ship was in the rings of Saturn when a solar flare hit the ship. His fellow teammates die, but he returns to Earth and wakes up to find that he's melting. And he starts to kill people to feed on them. He looks slimy and goopy and just gross. And when he walks by the camera, you see his feet. They're leaving like a oozy trail on the ground underneath them. And yeah, the practical effects apparently were a real bad, tough situation for the actor to wear. He hated wearing them because he had to keep pouring his slime and his goop all over him. But it just looks so good. It's a movie terrified me as a kid because it looks realistic. You know, this person is really melting. And the way that he melts at the end of the movie, because he's an incredible melting man, spoilers. But yeah, totally fun movie. Great practical effects. Again, why practical effects will always beat CGI. I don't really care. Practical effects will always beat them when you really put, you know, your hard work into it. So yeah, for best score, Zombie, my best selection, and my close runner-up, The Incredible Melting Man. And my selection for the most unique movie to come out in the 1970s, I'm sticking with Defula, which released in 1975. This is one of those unique horror movies I've ever watched. It's a Dracula movie for the hearing impaired. The actors don't speak in the film. They all use sign language, and there is a voiceover for people who don't read sign language. It's a very interesting concept for a film. It's worth a watch just for uniqueness alone. I've never heard about a movie like this made specifically for the hearing impaired to ever release before or after Defula. You know, now it's easy to watch a movie nowadays with closed captioning for those people who, you know, who are the hearing impaired, but there really wasn't an option for the 70s. It's totally not as common as it is now, so making a movie fully for the hearing impaired is what makes this movie unique. And it's not a bad movie by any means. It's totally worth the watch. Just for, like I said, for the uniqueness alone, just to get the feel of it, it's really interesting. Check it out. And out of all of my selections for most unique throughout the 70s, Defula is the one that really stood out to me for being most unique. Now, for runner-up, I went with ERASERHEAD, released in 1977. David Lynch's directorial debut. This black and white movie establishes David Lynch's style. This movie requires multiple viewings because there's so much audience interpretation with it. The movie has a surreal, atmospheric quality to it. The sound design is an integral part of this film. The body deformities are filled in a way that really make you feel uncomfortable. And this is a movie that kind of hits you on different levels. It's not an easy movie to explain the plot or a synopsis to somebody. It just kind of has to be seen to get the feel of the movie. It's one of the most unique movies I've ever watched. This movie has a legacy for a reason. You know, if you liked anything David Lynch has ever put out and you haven't seen ERASERHEAD, stop what you're doing and watch ERASERHEAD. Highly recommended not only to watch this movie, but to experience this movie. And yeah, I had to select it as my runner-up for the most unique horror movie to come out in the 1970s. Up to most overrated now, and my most overrated selection for the 1970s goes to Beware the Blob, released in 1972. A sequel to the 1958 horror classic about a gelatinous-like substance that consumes everything it touches and grows larger and larger with everything it eats. This sequel is not good. They went with the comedic route, and I don't think it works. It's a goofy movie that kind of just feels like a parody. You know, Beware the Blob is sandwiched between two fantastic movies, the original and the awesome remake. There's not much else to say about this movie. I didn't like the comedic undertones. It wasn't funny. It wasn't good. The acting was bad. The effects I really just didn't care for this movie. I can't recommend it. And it's definitely not a so bad it's good movie. I would say just avoid this movie. It's not a good movie. When you look at the Blob franchise, yeah, there's two movies that are so good. I have this one sandwiched in between is just sad because I really don't enjoy it. If you do, let me know in the comments down below what you enjoy about this movie. Do you like the way they went with the comedic route? You know, I'd be curious to know. But for me, I think it's overrated. And for the entire 1970s, yeah, surely my most overrated pick. Now, for my runner-up, probably my most controversial pick in this episode, The Crazies, released in 1973. Now, Beware the Blob is a bad movie. The Crazies is not a bad movie. I just don't like it as much as most people. It's a George Romero film. He didn't want to make another zombie film, so he made The Crazies. And, his films typically have a social commentary, and which is very common with his filmography. And yeah, there's totally social commentary in this film. But to me, I really didn't feel anything special about this movie. None of the characters really stood out to me as memorable. I didn't remember anybody's name on it. After I finished watching it, I was like, okay, yep, that was a movie. It's not a zombie movie, but you kind of see, the zombie influences with everybody going crazy in it, attacking people. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I just don't like it as much as everybody else. So to me, it fit the category pretty well for my most overrated selection for the 1970s. And we're going to wrap things up with my most underrated horror pick for the 1970s. I love this movie, Tourist Trap, released in 1979. My most recent underrated pick. I love this movie. Chuck Connors is creepy and charming at the same time. You don't get a backstory for the villain in this movie, and I love that. You never find out anything about Slauson, why he got these powers from, or anything about him. The movie keeps you on your toes. It's kind of hard to predict where this movie will go during its runtime. Trying to guess what's going on or what's going to happen next. It's not easy. Again, I love the score to this movie. The setting, the acting is great. And the ending left me stunned the first time I saw it. I actually had to back the movie up a few minutes to make sure I didn't accidentally miss anything. And it's hard to pull that off without annoying the viewer, making think they missed something. But this movie kind of pulls it off perfectly. The story is great. I like the special effects in it. Yeah, Chuck Connors, I can keep talking about him on how creepy and charming he is at the same time. Really great, underrated slasher. So, yeah, when I looked at all my 10 picks for the 1970s, I love Tourist Trap the most. So, I had to select it for my most underrated horror pick for the entire decade. Now, for my runner-up, I went with early 70s and Tales from the Crypt, horror anthology released in 1972. When somebody hears Tales from the Crypt, they normally think about The Crypt Keeper and the HBO series that he hosted. And they may not know that Tales from the Crypt was a horror anthology based off the comics from EC Comics. The stories in these movies are based on stories that were in the comics. My favorite story is Blind Alley. It's a classic story involving an evil antagonist who treats everybody like crap, only to get his comeuppance in the end in a very, very satisfying and therapeutic way. But all these stories have a similar theme, and none of them are stinkers. It's about somebody who's evil and bad, and they're getting their comeuppance. Tales from the Crypt is a traditional horror anthology with a really cool wraparound story. And the horror genre is pretty much saturated with horror anthologies nowadays, but this movie did it really well 50 years ago. So if you're a fan of horror anthologies and you've never watched Tales from the Crypt, check it out and put yourself back in 1972, 52 years ago, not thinking about all these current horror anthologies. There weren't that many horror anthologies back there, so Tales from the Crypt could also be really unique, but I selected it as my most underrated runner-up for the 1970s. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all my picks. Here's a summary. Thanks again for watching this video. Thanks again for watching all these horror movie superlatives videos that Carl and I worked on. We put a lot of hard work into it, and we really love that everybody's watching it and enjoying this series that Carlin created. After you watch this video, please go to Carlin's video, link in the description. Watch his video with the same title as this one, and please go to the community tab on his page and vote for who you thought had the better picks. It's all in good fun. Watch both videos and then vote. We both really appreciate it. I believe Carl and I are going to cover the 90s for our next installment of Horror Movie Superlatives. And I think those videos are going to start the first Wednesday in November. Because I know we both have some additional stuff planned for the month of October being spooky season. If you could do me a favor, if you're still watching, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, so you don't miss any of the videos on my channel or Carl's channel. Hit that notification bell as well. Every Friday, I put a new Nails in a Coffin series, and I'm going to have and feel for the next few weeks wrapping up that franchise. So subscribe to both of our channels. I don't think you're going to regret it. Thanks again, everybody. We both really much appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Stay safe. Stay happy. I am your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and remember, with great kills, there must also come great nails.